Now we've got some really advanced pivot tables. What we want to do is make the formatting even more impactful so it's even easier to draw insights from your pivot table. Now we're going to go revisit something we did earlier in the course, conditional formatting, but see how it can be applied to a pivot table. And you're really going to like this. So we should be on our conditional formatting tab, and we're going to recreate 3 different pivots. And I'm just going to show you what they are first. So the first pivot we have, it's by product and location. And we've added data bars to the right of each number. So you can tell quickly, oh, there's the biggest one, 931. Now, if we scroll over to the right a little bit, we come to another conditional formatting pivot table. This one uses the indicator buttons, green, yellow, and red. But this one, the way that's different is we can actually type the values in here of what we want the thresholds to be. So I can make yellow go up to 400. And then I could have red go from 0 to 200. And so this is going to be a really useful tool when you're building interactive dashboards and you want to be able to see what happens when you change different values. And the last one we're going to do is what's called a heat map. And we did heat maps before, but this is really impactful in a pivot table too, because it kind of shows the spread of all the values in the pivot table really quickly and at a glance. Okay, and so we'll see that and see how to add location and dates in there too. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to recreate all these from scratch and apply some conditional formatting. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning here and let's go down, scroll a little bit down, and we're going to go to C25 to start our pivot. So this time we're going to go to Insert and Pivot Table, and our data source is going to be called T Bakery Shop. And click OK. That adds the pivot. Now let's add our items to the rows. And we're going to add our locations across the top. And then the number of items sold. Okay, I'll get rid of this pivot table fields. And we'll look at this. First things first, we're going to get rid of the grand totals just to make it easier to see the formatting. Grand totals off for columns and rows. And now we're going to go to conditional formatting. Let's go here. Let's go up to the home and make sure you're somewhere in that pivot table and just go to conditional formatting. And the first thing we want to do is data bars. So we'll go down here and click on a data bar and click OK. Now, before when we did conditional formatting, we told it the range of data to encompass. And we're still going to do the same thing. But when you have it on the pivot table, you can click this button right here. And instead of applying the formatting to selected cells, look, we can do it to all cells showing the sum of values sold or all for item and location too. So let's go ahead and click that. And now we've got data bars on every item and location. So that's similar to the old conditional formatting we did, but it just applies to the whole pivot table. Let's go ahead and modify this because in some of these it runs over the text. Just to remember this technique, manage rules. And we'll go to Edit Rule. And now, instead of the right edge of the bar being at the maximum or automatic, we're going to have it be well beyond 930 so that it doesn't overshadow the number. So I can go to a number and just make it be 1200. And click OK and then Apply. And maybe I need to do a little bit more. Edit Rule, let's make it 1500 just to be safe. And click OK. Now we have data bars that show the items sold in a graphical way. But it's a little unusual because the data bar is all the way over on the left, especially for some of these that are really small. It's kind of not that intuitive to read. So here's a trick we can do with the pivot table. Let me bring my field selector back up. And we're going to add the sum of items sold again. So click that and drag that here. And what we're going to do here is drag that in front of the data bars. Okay. Now you see how we got the numbers right next to a data bar now. So let's do a couple things first. On sum of items sold to, we're just going to go to value field settings and just call that items. Click OK. So that's a much more concise header. And then for some of items sold where the data bars are, let's go here and we're just going to call that dot, dot, dot. Because it's really the same thing. It's the number of items, but it's just the graphical representation. And the last thing we're going to do is go into our conditional formatting rule. Go back here to home. And we're going to take off the numbers for that second field. So we're only going to show the bars on the second instance of the items. Click apply, and there you go. Click OK, get rid of that. Now the pivot table really looks sharp. Now these columns are purposely a little short because we don't need to take a ton of room. We just want to show that graphic right next to the number, so it's a real quick reference. Now let's scroll over and put the icons on the pivot table. So I'll scroll over here and go down to N25, insert the pivot table again, T Bakery Shop. And same thing, we're going to put the items down the rows and the location across the top. And we'll put the sum of items sold down there. And now let's add our conditional formatting. So come up here, go to home. Do it the same way, come down here and go to icon sets. We'll just do red, yellow, and green. Click OK. And now let's go up to conditional formatting and manage rules before we expand it. Because if you do this, you can modify it there too. If I go to edit rule, up at the top gives us the same thing that shortcut did. All cells showing sum of items sold or sum of items sold with location and item. We're going to do that one. And then for the icon values, we want to do it by numbers first, okay? So when red is less than 33, we want that to be less than 100. So instead of percent, let's do a number, and let's just type in 100 there. For the green-yellow distinction, let's again put this to a number, and we're going to have that be 200. And click apply. And there, pretty simple. We've got indicator buttons on each of our values this time. Well, now we want to make it dynamic, so you can just type in a value there. So I did some formatting here. So just copy these cells here, put them down next to cakes, and then just type in a number next to red and yellow. So everything under 100 is going to be red, and everything under 200 is yellow. Those are products that aren't selling very much, and we want to call attention to those. So let's go back into our pivot table and go to conditional formatting, manage rules, and edit rule. So what we did to set this up as a number was just type the number in there for the value for when it turns to yellow or red. But what we can do instead of that is go in here, delete out that number, click this up arrow, and then just click on the number for the yellow, and it puts in the cell address, M28. And let's go to the other one. And to be honest, you don't even have to click that arrow there. Once your cursor's in this control here, you can just click the cell and it puts it in there. Click OK and apply. And that's all done. Now, if I type in new values here, the pivot table is dynamic with the thresholds of the red, yellow, and green. This is really useful when you're doing a presentation and you have people ask a lot of questions. You can easily bump numbers up and down, and it'll show at a quick glance what the impact is. I'll go back and leave that as the values we wanted. So let's move over and do our final pivot with conditional formatting. We're going to do the heat map, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit to row 45, just to keep it as a round type of number. And we'll go ahead and add our pivot table. Let's go to Insert Pivot Table. Bakery Shop. Click OK. And we'll start it the way we did the other ones. We'll just do items there and location across the top, and then total items sold in the values. And we'll scroll down a little bit. And now let's add the heat map. So again, click somewhere in here. Let's go to conditional formatting and go down to color scales. And let's do this green that fades out to white. Go there. Just to be quick, I'll click here and add in sum of value sold of item and location and get rid of my totals. Okay, so that's pretty much the same as the others, but now what we want to do is just to prove how this is dynamic. So let's go ahead and take day and put that in columns. And that's a pretty big mess right there. So we're going to take location, move that over to rows. And you see how this pivot table expanded and all the conditional formatting expanded with it to encompass every dimension that we've put on that pivot table and every value. And it's a really, really powerful tool. Now, one of the things we might want to do here too, we have a lot of elements of summarization in the pivot table, and sometimes too many is too much of a good thing. So even though we're grouping by location, we don't necessarily want a subtotal. That's going to make it a little bit too busy for this one. So let's go back, turn the subtotals off. There we go. And now we see all the values and they're colored in the heat map so we know what the biggest ones are. Right away, my eyes went right to 200 for cookies on May 9th in Manhattan. Well, that's about it for this lesson on conditional formatting with pivot tables. I hope you think they're as cool as I do. Definitely, take a little time, practice with these a little bit, but this is really, really a great tool to take your pivot tables to the next level. All right, let's get ready for the next lesson.